sort of gave the president an open shot there.
Well, the point he was making is that the president was attacking. He was on the attack, and he was saying, Josh, you have investments in China. Well, so does the president, apparently, in his pension. And the president may not have known that, but Mitt Romney made that point. So that was just an opportunity to say, look, that's not the issue in this campaign. The issue in this campaign is who's going to help middle-class families get ahead, who's going to get this economy back on track. And Mitt Romney laid out a clear agenda for that. I mean, he had a vision tonight.
On the attack on the consulate in Libya, we had that moment there when our moderator, Candy Crowley, corrected Governor Romney and said, no, the president in that Rose Garden address did refer to an act of terror in Benghazi. I talked to Bobby Jindal earlier, and he said, well, that was sort of a general reference to an act of terror. Is that what the Romney campaign's response at this point?
Jim, we're all going to go back and look at the record here. He used the words act of terror in a general sense. But listen, for 5 days, they said just the opposite. I mean, how can you say anything other than that? 5 days later, you had the U.S. ambassador to the United Nations on all of the shows, including yours, saying this was not an act of terrorism. This was in response to a YouTube video. It was a demonstration. Why did they do that? That's the question. It's troubling. What's more troubling is why wasn't the security there? So I don't think Benghazi helps the president. All
right, Senator, thanks very much for your time. Jim. We appreciate it. And as you can tell, Wolf, this back and forth over that attack in Libya is going to continue even after tonight's debate. Wolf.
Yeah, I'll just read the exact quote, what the president said on that day after the attack. He said, no acts of terror will ever shake the resolve of this nation, alter that character, or eclipse the light of the values that we stand for. Jim, thanks very much. We're also awaiting the results of our poll of tonight's debate watchers. This is a scientific poll. You'll see the results here. First, who do you think won? Who do they think won? Stand by.
Well, our expert team of producers and researchers, reporters has been busy figuring out whether the candidates were telling the truth in tonight's debate. John Berman is back with another reality check. John?
Anderson, we've all been talking about that Benghazi moment, so we wanted to lay out the facts here. The president claimed that the day after the attacks there, he did call it an act of terror. Romney seemed to suggest he did not. Let's listen.
There were other issues associated with this tragedy. There were many days that passed before we knew whether this was a spontaneous demonstration or actually whether it was a terrorist attack.
The day after the attack, Governor, I stood in the Rose Garden and I told the American people and the world that we were going to find out exactly what happened, that this was an act of terror.
Now, Romney went on to seem to disagree with that. So what are the facts? Let's listen carefully to what the president said in the Rose Garden the morning after the attack.
No acts of terror will ever shake the resolve of this great nation, alter that character, the light of the values that we stand for. Today we mourn for more Americans who represent the very best of the United States of America. We will not waver in our commitment to see that justice is done for this terrible act.
Now, you heard it right there. He called it an act of terror, so our verdict here is true. However, in the days that followed, in the weeks that followed, President Obama flat out avoided using the word terrorism. He was asked directly, and this doesn't get into the issue of how long the administration blamed the film, but the day after in the Rose Garden, he did call it an act of terror. Wolf?
John, thank you. Both of the candidates talked about their plans for reducing the deficit. Our Tom Foreman has a reality check on that. Tom?
Yeah, Wolf, these candidates have made the deficit a cornerstone of this election. The difference between how much money the United States government is spending and how much it is taking in tax revenue, and they did indeed talk about it tonight. Listen.
I'll get us on track to a balanced budget, and I'm going to reduce the tax burden on middle-income families. And what's that going to do? It's going to help those families, and it's going to create incentives to start growing jobs again in this country.
If we're serious about reducing the deficit, if this is genuinely a moral obligation to the next generation, then in addition to some tough spending cuts, we've also got to make sure that the wealthy do a little bit more.
This is the deficit for this year, $1,090 billion. If we were all just going to pay it right now, every man, woman, and child in the country would have to kick in about $3,500. So it's a whopping problem, and yet each candidate effectively said tonight what they've said all along: I can reduce the deficit. How can they do that? Well, they agree on certain things. We're going to have to control spending at the government level. We're going to have to rewrite the tax code. We're going to have to get the economy really moving, because that's what's going to create all that revenue that'll solve the problem. But beyond that, They don't agree much. Let's look at the Romney plan. If this was everything that Mitt Romney wants to spend on running the government the way he would like to, and this was all the money he needed, he's not going to get it. He's going to have a deficit, less money. How is he going to fill the gap? With tax cuts. Now, tax cuts initially will make the deficit worse. So he says he's going to offset those with deductions. He's going to go after the deductions, the loopholes out there, things that people use to avoid paying taxes. He likes to suggest he's not going to go after things like mortgages or health care deductions, things that a lot of middle-class people rely on, but that's the problem. Economists who have looked at this, some of them have said, even if you gather up all the other possible deductions from richer people and you bring them back over here, it's not going to be enough. Eventually, you're going to have to hit the middle class, or you're going to watch this deficit just get bigger and bigger. Wolf?
So what about President Obama's plan? Does it hold up to scrutiny, Tom, any better than Mitt Romney's plan?
Let's look at that. He has the same thing. He's got a plan of spending, things that he would like to do. He'd like to have all this money to cover it. He won't. He'll also have a deficit. How does he want to deal with it? He said it again tonight. Let's tax the wealthy more. This is a popular idea in polls, but look at the problem that it has. There aren't that many wealthy people in the country. If you talk about people making more than $200,000 individually, for every one there is who makes that much money, this is how many there are who don't make that much. You would actually have to tax this person at a much higher level than what the White House is suggesting if you wanted to really make up much difference in this pile over here. The truth is, that's a level they're not willing to talk about. And the president said the math doesn't add up in Mitt Romney's plan. The math doesn't really add up in either one of these plans based on the details we have so far. We need many, many more. So this basic claim from both sides, I can reduce the deficit, we're going to give a big grade of I for incomplete. Neither one is giving enough answers to give us much faith in that, Wolf.
And Tom, even if we did have all the details, and we clearly don't, it seems to me that both of these candidates would face huge political problems passing anything like they would really want to.
Absolutely. There's a political reality here that almost anyone in the country can see. Congress right now, as we know, is divided. The House is under the control of the Republicans. The Senate is under the control of the Democrats. Unless this election unites these houses and the White House, unless one party controls everything, it is very hard to see how you're going to get agreement to approve either one of these plans, which makes the future for dealing with the deficit, at least right now with these candidates, Wolf, it looks pretty bleak.
Tom, I love these reality checks. You and John doing an excellent job. Let's go back to Anderson.
Thanks very much, Wolf. You know, this whole acts of terror thing, I mean, I don't think it is as clear a slam dunk as the Obama campaign would like it to be. I mean, in his speech, he wasn't saying this was an act of terror. Previous to the paragraph where he said acts of terror, he'd been talking about 9/11 and obviously the killing of 4 Americans. He didn't reference that video in particular. But I do think it's open to debate. I can see why the Romney campaign is quibbling.
By misspeaking about exactly what the president said the day after, Governor Romney he's in this fact-check environment where this should be a problem for the president. This should not be a problem for what did Governor Romney say in a debate. Because he was wrong about that the president did generically refer to an act of terror the day after, we are correcting. Right. Candy corrected Governor Romney on the spot. And so we're having a question of, well, what did Governor Romney say as opposed to what did the administration do? So Governor Romney's choice of words there was a poor one. And so he's being fact-checked, and that takes something away from him. I would make this argument. This is going to be done in studios like this in Washington and in New York, and we're going to talk about it. Our undecided voters out there in the country, that small slice of undecided voters in a battleground state, going to make their decision based on what happened in Libya or based on who they think has a better economic plan. I vote the latter.
I totally agree. I mean, this is a murky situation. I think Candy had it right. Romney clearly got it wrong on one fact, but there's the bigger story. But surely we're not going to spend a lot of time on trying to litigate this one.
Let's actually bring in much bigger let's bring in Candy, though. Candy, because this was a moment which obviously now both campaigns are going to be focusing on. Tell us your thoughts during that moment.
Well, you know, again, I heard the president's speech at the time. I sort of reread a lot of stuff about Libya because I knew we'd probably get a Libya question, so I kind of wanted to be up on it. So I knew that the president had had said, you know, these acts of terror won't stand, or whatever the whole quote was. And I think actually, you know, because right after that, I did turn around and say, but you're totally correct, that they spent 2 weeks telling us this was about a tape, and that there was this riot outside the Benghazi consulate, which there wasn't. So he was right in the main. I just think he picked the wrong word. And you know, they're going to parse, and we all know about what the definition of is, but you know, in the end, I think John's probably right. I think this has a lot more to do with jobs and the debt crisis and all of that kind of stuff. I just think probably it was one of those moments, and I could even feel that here. You know, when you say something you're not expecting, it's just that was the natural thing to come out of me going, actually, he did, you know, call it an act of terror. When, you know, half the crowd claps for that and the other half claps for, but they kept telling us this was caused by a tape. So you know, in the main, the thrust of what Governor Romney was saying, which is why I went back and said that. But I just think he picked the wrong kind of way to go about talking about it. Does that make sense?
Candy, it's John. You're sitting right there. One of our questions going in, neither candidate looked at his watch. Neither candidate went over and hugged one of those voters in the audience. But one of the questions was, you know, who of them might make the better connection? Governor Romney used their names frequently, circled back to them. The president did that. Did you get a sense there from, as you're sitting there, I know you're preparing the next question, but from those voters on the stage there with you, did any of them think that one candidate did better than the other in connecting?
I don't think they actually did, to tell you the truth. And you know, I really did get the sense, we spent some time with them today. Their uncommittedness was certainly genuine, or so it seemed to us. And I think they were all so pleased to be there. And they were so kind of in awe of the process that afterwards it was like, wasn't this great? You know, didn't we like it when the governor said this? Oh, and then the president said that. So they were talking about the exchanges. One guy said, I thought for a minute they were going to hit each other. And I actually never felt that. I told you, you know, I didn't feel like that was like personal animosity, but they definitely felt all of those things that 90 minutes are. You know, you're up and it feels tense, it goes down, it takes a little lull, it goes back up again. But I think that they enjoyed the scene.
From here, it felt very contentious. I thought that the two of them were really...
I got that same sense.
Right.
Just from sitting up here, I was looking at them thinking, who's going to knock the other one out
They're very close
first?
to each other. They seemed very hostile toward each other. And I actually thought hostile in sometimes, back to you, when they wouldn't answer the question, or even some of the audience members whose question would sort of be ignored while they'd say, well, let me answer what I'm going to answer first.
About Chinese currency here a minute.
Yeah.
Wait.
And you know, Candy, one of the things that you are rightly being applauded for is not letting them get away with things. You tried. Sometimes both of them try to run you over.
Got away with. Right. It's kind of like,
but you tried. But you tried. But I think it would be interesting for the audience to know that you made sure that you were in a physical position to do that.
I did. One of the things that struck me, and I think Jim Lair had certainly the debate that he wanted to have, and the two of them had great exchanges on a lot of subjects. But I thought when I looked at it that it is so hard to take command of a stage when you're sitting down and they're towering over you. So when I came in and saw this stage, and I also have back problems, so I will say that, but I said, I want to stand. I want to stand up because we're on the same level. Remember, Jim Lair was down. It looked like an orchestra pit. You know, I was in the hall that day, and he was so much lower than they were. So I wanted to be able, when I could, to say, we're done. It's actually this person's turn, and at least be in some kind of
up high helped you do that.
Helped me at least feel like they had to somehow. Now, they still ignored me at times, but they, you know, I felt like they had to contend with me in a way.
In some ways, when it comes to the way the viewers saw them, it was at their peril that they ignored you.
Candy, I know David Gergen also has a question for you.
Yeah. Candy, David Gergen.
David.
Hi there.
Wait, I'm sorry. David, sorry. I'm just told we got our first poll results, so let's quickly go to that. We'll come back to Candy and David.
All right, Anderson, we have the first results in from our scientific poll. This is a scientific poll of registered voters who watched tonight's debate. Here are the results. 46% say President Obama won the debate. 39% say Governor Romney won the debate. 73% say President Obama did better than expected. 10% say he did worse. 16% thought President Obama did the same as they had expected. As for Governor Romney, 37% of the debate watchers say he did better than expected. 28% say he did worse. 33% say Governor Romney did about the same as they had expected. We have more results, more answers to other questions. By the way, the sample debate watchers in this CNN poll were 33% Democrat, 33% Republican. That indicates that the sample of debate watchers is about 8 points more Republican than the average of CNN polls taken in 2012 of all.